All right, U.S. history students. So we're going to finish up Unit 2 today with this short lesson about an important and kind of a messy transition. So here at the end of the revolutionary period, we've got this key moment in which it's like, all right, we've built this new constitution. We got our independence. We built a constitution. We've had 8 years with our guy George Washington at the wheel. Now, what happens when we turn the wheel over? We turn leadership over to someone who's not the indispensable man, right? Who's not George Washington. And what that starts to look like is maybe a little less inspirational, like the founding can be, and in certain ways a little messier and a little more like our contemporary politics. And so this is a good transition for us to kind of watch what that looked like. We can see our learning targets here today. I can explain the difficulties of the Adams presidency. So we'll talk about John Adams, poor John Adams as president, and what was a challenge for him there. I can explore the temptation to silence political opponents, which is a temptation I bet you guys feel sometimes, or you can imagine during a season like this. So that's what we're going to be up to, and we're going to finish up our long-term target. I can explain and appreciate the order that was established in America's constitutional system. So, to begin, we've got a new president, all right? And when George Washington steps down, decides not to run for another term in office, and he hands the keys, or he doesn't hand the keys over to anyone. He hands the keys back to the American public. The American public hands the keys to John Adams. Things get messy for a while. Poor John Adams. Honestly, can you imagine having to follow George Washington? You know, the great American hero from the Revolution, the natural born leader, tall, handsome, wise, revered by everybody. And here you are. I'm sorry, just look at him. You're short, you're bald, you're you know, you don't look maybe the way you want to look. You're easy to be made fun of, and people make fun of you all the time because Adams was in a lot of ways, kind of his own worst enemy. Like I note here, he was very smart, extraordinarily smart, and often wise. History, frankly, has proven him right on many, many things. But Adams is also prickly. He can't not take the bait when it comes to arguments. He's not good at soliciting allies. He's not good at the natural bargaining work of politics. He's better at lecturing people. Have you ever known someone like that? He's just better at kind of lecturing and hassling people and complaining about how he's right and they're wrong. And that's kind of his natural disposition. He's not really naturally suited for politics, and that's going to make it hard for him. Even if he's right much of the time as president, Adams also has, in certain ways, a harder job than George Washington did in this one sense. George Washington is kind of above criticism in so many ways. There were people who disagreed with him, and there was like an opposition party led by Thomas Jefferson that disagreed with him, but they weren't stupid enough to directly attack George Washington, right? They knew that wasn't going to work with the public. But John Adams, why not attack and criticize John Adams? So it's really under John Adams that we begin this great American tradition, which is the person who's the most criticized and made fun of in American life is usually the President of the United States. That wasn't the case under Washington. That's pretty much constantly been the case since John Adams. And so John Adams is the first president to experience what it's like to have heavy opposition political opponents like Thomas Jefferson, and a political party who's just, takes like a bombs away approach of attacking you. And John Adams is not well suited to take that smoothly or to take that lying down. John Adams is probably going to overreact, which is going to cause more problems. So that's, again, poor John Adams. Even if he's right, he tends to put himself into problem spots. Ben Franklin, who knew Adams well and who often was allies with John Adams and partners with him, wrote privately about John Adams. He said, "I'm persuaded that he means well for his country. He's always an honest man, often a wise one, but sometimes, and in some things, absolutely out of his senses." So this is wise old Ben Franklin, right? Who's the master of communication and the master of bargaining and negotiation in politics, who just is like shaking his head at John Adams, like, dude, you're right, but you are making things much worse for yourself. So this is the guy we're going to study. Now, the situation of Adams's presidency is it is uniquely complex, and I'm going to try and unpack that for us a little bit here. And I can't simplify that. I'll simplify it as much as I can without just annihilating the truth of it. But I would say a lot of the problems in John Adams' presidency came from across the ocean. So the French Revolution had started back during George Washington's presidency. And the French Revolution, if you know anything about that, if you remember things about it from world history, the French Revolution started off a lot like the American Revolution, declaring universal ideals of human rights and people being born equal. And so at first, Americans are looking at the French Revolution saying, cool, all right, there's another country that's joining us. That's great. They're getting rid of their king, right? And they're going to establish a new constitution and a new republic. And this is really cool, right, buddies? High five, France. And that's great. And a lot of Americans like, we should support them and we should help them. And George Washington, as president, says, we will give them a thumbs up from America, but we're not going to send money or soldiers because we can't afford to do either of those things. We're just not going to do that. As the French Revolution progressed and developed, you might know that it does not become like the American Revolution, right? The American Revolution has a nice, nifty ending where we win this war and then we write this awesome constitution and we're like Simone Biles, like sticking the landing on the floor routine. And the French Revolution sort of just goes haywire. It goes berserk. It descends into mob violence. It starts eating itself, right? I mean, they literally kill. It's not just that they get rid of the king and queen. Now it's like we have to kill the king and queen. Now we have to get rid of kings and queens all across Europe. And so other countries in Europe are like, hey, France, time out, chill. You guys are going crazy here. And it becomes this war of like France versus the rest of Europe, which is kind of crazy. And at that point, President Washington and then President Adams are like, hey, we're not going to touch this one with a 10-foot pole. This revolution has gone haywire. And if anything, John Adams is like, look, England, who we haven't been buddy-buddy with, to put it mildly, but England is leading the efforts to sort of like corral and contain the craziness of the French Revolution. John Adams is like, I'm kind of on Team England here. I favor England more than France. And by the way, Adams is like, we do a lot of business with England. And so I'm definitely not jumping in on this war to help France. We're going to stay out of it. And there were Americans, especially of the, Thomas Jefferson and the Republicans, that side of the political spectrum, who were like, we should be supporting France. I mean, Jefferson's take, again, Jefferson is not in office. He's in retirement right now. He's basically heading an opposition political party. Adams is the head of the Federalists, right? And Jefferson is the head of the Republicans. And Jefferson's like, we should be helping France. France is our brothers in this revolution. They helped us. We should help them. They're declaring certain key universal values. We say that we believe those too. We should be helping France. Adams is like, I'm not helping anyone, right? We're not getting involved in this. This is crazy. And Jefferson's saying, John Adams, by kind of quietly supporting England instead of France, is telling you, the American people, that he doesn't actually believe in America's ideals either. He never believed in any of this stuff, right? So the opposition party is really piling on John Adams for not supporting France in this French Revolution. And Adams is just like, I'm just trying to stay out of the whole stupid thing. We don't need to get involved in Europe's wars. And so, pardon me, pausing this. All right, students, apologies about that. Life has a funny way of interrupting, even when I get a good lather going like that. Okay, so anyway, back into the situation. Europe is at war, and America is trying to stay out of the war. Adams is absolutely dedicated to staying out of the war. And it's hard because as England and France are trading punches, they keep kind of catching us. We keep getting clipped in the crossfire. We keep getting caught in it, right? So like England, as they fight France, England keeps doing this thing of the word at the time was impressing British American soldiers. And that sounds like they're trying to, it's not impressing in the positive sense. It literally means kidnapping, all right? They're trying to like seize or take American sailors on American ships and force them into the British Navy. And this is kind of insane. And again, they're thinking what Britain was thinking was this: we need sailors in these battles. They've got rules. They've got their own draft, and a lot of people were running away from the draft in England. You know, they don't want to serve in the British Navy. American accents and British accents don't sound all that different, and so when they would come across sailors, anywhere, they would sort of say you, and they would say you're being impressed or drafted into the British Navy, and the Americans would say you can't draft us. We're Americans. We're not British citizens. We're American citizens. And the British would say, yeah, that's what they all say. They all pretend to be Americans, but we know you're faking it. And they weren't faking it, but like at the same time, on the American side, we're saying you can't just take American citizens and force them into your military. That's crazy. And Britain was like, well, what are you going to do about it, right? Like, sorry, not sorry. What are you guys going to do about it anyway? We need the soldiers to fight in this war. And so John Adams says, okay, well, this is ridiculous. And John Adams establishes the United States Navy. He just says, by an act of the president, the commander in chief, we need a Navy. He begins building it up. And I think Adams and before him, George Washington had said, to protect our rights, we need to build up our military as a way of like protecting our rights. Republicans were saying building up a navy. Now, Adams is acting like a king, or now Adams is spending too much money on this stuff. And I think it's fair to say when you look at it, Republicans were a little bit naive. They were naive about the direction the French Revolution was going in. They were naive about the idea that you could somehow protect the rights of American people without having a military. And Adams and Washington and the Federalists had a little bit more of a sensible foreign policy. Okay, so there's all that arguing going on about foreign policy. That argument over foreign policy led John Adams to make a critical mistake, and a mistake that would really tarnish his reputation in many ways. And that mistake was he signed into law two laws packaged together called the Alien and Sedition Acts. Now, the context was there was a lot of screaming and hollering going on politically. Opposition political party, the Republicans, are accusing Adams of being pro-British, anti-French. They're accused Adams of being secretly, wanting to be a king himself, like favoring a monarchy, being anti-American, being sort of saying that he never believed in the American Revolution in the first place. All kinds of like these really heated charges and accusations going at John Adams. And that's happening toward the president of the United States for the first time ever, because again, previously no one would criticize Washington like that. In Congress, the Federalist Party passes these laws that say, hey, it is illegal to criticize the federal government like that. It's illegal to criticize the president of the United States like that and call him disloyal. Like, you can't say those things about our president. You can't say those things about our government. And you might say, well, that's kind of against the First Amendment, right? and I'd say, yeah, that is. But the Federalist Party is basically mad at the Republican Party. And this law, in addition, also said, if we've got a lot of immigrants in this country who seem to be more loyal to France and wanting us to get involved and fight this war to help France than they seem to be loyal to the United States. And so we're going to make it easy to kick these immigrants out of the country. Whereas previously, the immigration policy in the United States was, if you can get your 2 feet on shore in the United States, then congratulations, you're an American citizen. Now it's saying we want to get a bunch of these aliens, right? These illegal aliens, they weren't really illegal aliens, but these immigrants who seem to be loyal to France, we want to get them out of our country. Adams is, his own instincts say these laws are bad news, and one of them seems to contradict the First Amendment. But he also says, in some pretty weak sauce excuse, he says, my party seems to want to defend me. And Federalists in Congress passed the law. I didn't ask them to, but they passed a law trying to stand up for me. And so who am I, the president, to say you guys can't stand up for me? And so Adams sort of bites his teeth and signs these things into law. And Republicans howl, they freak out, and they say, John Adams signing this law tells you all you need to know about John Adams and what he thinks about your rights, right? All John Adams wants to do is make the federal government more powerful than ever and make it illegal to criticize him and blah blah blah, and they accuse him of being, like, again, someone who wants to make himself a king or a dictator, all these things. And Adams is like, we passed this law because you guys are being insane with your criticisms of me. And they're just going back and forth and back and forth. Now, look, students, this law backfires. It's passed by Federalists. It only hurts the Federalists because it seems to give ammunition to the Republicans. It's not like thousands of people got put in jail for criticizing the president. You know, what was it? 10 people got put in jail. But that's 10 people in the United States of America who were put in jail for their political opinions. Not anything they did or not any attacks, actual physical attacks they did, but like for saying their political opinions. Mostly some politicians and newspaper writers. A couple Republican newspapers got shut down, but many more popped up. It just seemed to really animate the opposing side. Have you ever noticed anything like that in our politics today? Students, our politics in America looks like a Royal Rumble oftentimes. So what's the problem with the Alien and Sedition Acts? Can you understand the temptation of why Federalists tried passing it? Ultimately, what is the problem with it? You can guess this law will get thrown out not long afterwards because it's unconstitutional. And so in 1800, after 4 years of John Adams being president, he runs for re-election, of course. Thomas Jefferson, formerly one of his best friends, runs against him as the head of the Republican Party. They ran crazy attacks against each other. This is considered probably the nastiest, dirtiest election in American history, just in terms of the crazy accusations and attacks. Each side basically accuses the other one of being an enemy to the United States, totally disloyal to the revolution, and wanting, all kinds of crazy stuff. They each accuse each other of being traitors. It's pretty ugly and grim. Jefferson wins. Adams sulks and slinks off. It's not a good look. He's not able to sort of shake Jefferson's hand in victory. He just sort of like disappears and mutters under his breath for many years. This election gets even uglier because Alexander Hamilton, who was sort of tied into some of the very, very complex maneuverings in this election, got killed in a duel with his fellow Aaron Burr, that arose from arguments that they were having about this election. So it's just basically one other founding father is pointlessly killed in a stupid duel over this whole thing. Much later, the two men, Adams and Jefferson, apologized to each other and reconciled. But yeah, it was a mess, and it's a weird place to leave off. But that's where we're going to leave off, right? The founding has finished. We're off and rolling. Our politics is messy, and it's remained messy ever since. Students, there's another video that's going to go with this that's going to talk about reviewing for the Unit 2 exam. But this is the material you need for Unit 2. Thanks for listening.